Lila had always loved the excitement of traveling alone. There was something about boarding a plane, leaving behind familiar streets, and soaring into the unknown that thrilled her. Today, she was flying from New York to London, a journey she had taken many times before. But this time it felt different. She had promised herself that she would enjoy the flight fully, not thinking about work, not worrying about deadlines, and certainly not thinking about the things she could not control. She had packed lightly, bringing only a small carry-on bag, a book she had been meaning to read for months, her headphones, and a journal to jot down her thoughts. She had chosen seat 8A because it was by the window, offering her a view of the sky and clouds, a little escape from the bustle of the cabin. As she walked down the aisle, she could feel the hum of the plane beneath her feet. Passengers were finding their seats, struggling slightly with overhead luggage and adjusting to the narrow space. Flight attendants moved with a calm, practiced efficiency, greeting people with warm smiles and guiding them to their places. Lila noticed a family in the row ahead, a mother soothing a small child who was frightened by the noise of the engines. Nearby, a businessman tapped away on his laptop, completely absorbed in his work. The air smelled faintly of coffee and recycled cabin air. She had learned over the years that the first moments on a plane were always full of little details: the shuffle of bags, the quiet conversations, the soft clicks of seatbelts being fastened. Lila slipped into her seat, adjusting the headrest and sliding her bag under it. She placed her headphones on, scrolling briefly through her playlist, before letting the soft, calming music fill her ears. The plane began to taxi toward the runway, and she watched through the small oval window as the ground moved past her. Trees, roads, and tiny cars blurred together as the aircraft gained speed. The feeling of acceleration pressed gently against her back, a reminder that she was leaving the familiar behind. Soon, the plane lifted off smoothly, and she felt the slight weightlessness that always accompanied takeoff. She exhaled slowly, letting her body relax. This was the part she loved the most, the moment when everything changed from ordinary to extraordinary, when the world below seemed small and distant. As the plane climbed to cruising altitude, the seatbelt sign clicked off, and the flight attendants moved down the aisles, offering drinks and snacks. Lila accepted a small bottle of water, sipping slowly as she gazed out at the clouds drifting past. They looked like soft, white mountains, endless and serene. The sky was a pale blue, stretching infinitely, and she felt a sense of calm wash over her. She adjusted her blanket and settled her head against the window, deciding it was time to rest. Her eyes grew heavy, and soon she drifted into a deep, peaceful sleep. The cabin around her seemed like a quiet, floating world. Passengers dozed in their seats, read books, or whispered to companions. The hum of the engines created a steady, soothing rhythm that seemed to lull everyone into a sense of safety. The flight attendants moved gracefully, offering gentle smiles and checking on those who seemed uncomfortable. For Lila, this was the perfect escape, a bubble of quiet and calm where nothing could touch her. She felt insulated from the world's worries, wrapped in the gentle cocoon of the plane's cabin. Yet, even in this calm, there were tiny hints that all was not entirely ordinary. Lila remembered feeling a small bump, a brief turbulence that rattled the plane slightly, just enough to stir her from her thoughts. It was minor, almost dismissible, but it lingered in her mind. She thought of it as a reminder that even in controlled environments, life could be unpredictable. But she shook the thought away, convinced it was nothing, just a routine part of flying. The clouds outside continued to drift lazily, and the sun shone brightly on the horizon, painting the sky with a soft glow. Time passed unnoticed. Lila dreamed lightly, drifting in and out of consciousness, unaware of the world around her. She saw fragments of familiar places in her mind, mixed with the soft motion of the plane. There was a strange comfort in the suspension of time, a feeling that nothing could reach her while she floated high above the earth. Passengers around her remained quiet, the occasional cough or shuffle of a bag breaking the stillness. The flight attendants moved efficiently, their voices low and calm as they checked on people, never revealing the stress that might have been beneath their professional smiles. From her small corner in seat 8A, Leela felt a curious mix of vulnerability and safety. She was far from home, surrounded by strangers, yet cocooned in a place designed for travel and protection. She noticed small details: the pattern of the seats, the soft hum of the ventilation, the way light shifted through the tiny windows as the plane moved through different layers of the sky. Everything seemed precise, predictable, and yet, somewhere deep down, she sensed that anything could change in an instant. She thought of her plans for London, meeting a friend she hadn't seen in years, walking along the Thames, exploring museums, and enjoying quiet moments in coffee shops. But for now, all that was paused. Right now, she was merely a passenger in a moving vessel, a small observer in a vast, controlled environment that carried hundreds of people across the sky. It was peaceful, almost meditative, and she welcomed the quiet. She felt the gentle vibration of the engines beneath her feet, the soft sway of the plane, and allowed herself to sink into rest completely. The first few hours passed without incident. Leela slept deeply, oblivious to conversations and movements around her. Occasionally, she stirred, adjusting her blanket or sipping water, then returned to her dreams. She felt detached from reality, yet strangely aware of the comforting hum of life all around her. The flight attendants continued their rounds, occasionally checking on passengers, offering a kind word, or helping someone adjust their seat. Leela noticed the efficiency and calm professionalism of the crew, feeling grateful for the order and care that kept the cabin running smoothly. Outside, the sky changed subtly as the plane moved over different regions. The sunlight dimmed slightly, giving way to a softer glow, and shadows danced across the clouds below. Leela, still half asleep, caught glimpses of this beauty through her window, feeling a sense of awe at the view. She had always loved flying because it offered a perspective impossible to get from the ground, a view of the world in its vastness. A reminder of how small individual concerns could be in the larger picture. And then, in the midst of this calm, the faintest sense of unease appeared. Leela did not know it yet, but the flight was about to take a sudden turn, an unexpected twist that would shatter the quiet and test the courage of everyone on board. But for now, she remained in her cocoon, unaware of the approaching challenge. The plane continued to glide steadily through the sky, carrying its passengers toward their destination, each one wrapped in their thoughts, dreams, or conversations. Leela was asleep, her body relaxed, her mind at peace, her heart ready for whatever adventure or danger was about to unfold. And so, in seat 8A, Leela slept, surrounded by strangers, floating above the earth in a silent, moving world. It was a moment of calm, a moment of beauty, a moment before the storm. She had no idea that very soon, her journey would become unforgettable, not for the destination, but for the courage, fear, and unexpected heroism that would define the hours ahead. Leela had just begun to drift back into sleep when a sharp, unexpected voice filled the cabin. It was the captain's voice over the intercom, calm, yet carrying a tension that immediately pulled everyone awake. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We are experiencing a mechanical issue. Please remain seated and fasten your seatbelts. Flight attendants, prepare for emergency procedures." The words were clear, but the meaning behind them sent a ripple of unease through the plane. Passengers who had been dozing stirred instantly, eyes wide with alarm. Leela blinked rapidly, trying to shake off the haze of sleep and understand what was happening. Her heart began to race, and a strange, sinking feeling settled in her stomach. She had flown many times before, but this was different. She could sense that the voice in the intercom was serious, that this was not a routine announcement. Around her, the cabin erupted in murmurs and whispers. Some passengers clutched the armrests of their seats tightly, while others looked around, searching for reassurance from strangers. A mother in the row ahead hugged her young child tightly, whispering soothing words, though her own voice trembled. Leila's own hands gripped the edges of her seat, the cool plastic pressing into her palms as she tried to focus. She felt disoriented, caught between fear and disbelief. The flight attendants moved quickly down the aisles, their expressions serious but composed. They were calm in a way that both reassured and unnerved the passengers. They were professionals who had clearly trained for emergencies like this. Yet the situation was real, unpredictable, and frightening. One attendant reached Lila's row, giving a small nod of encouragement before moving on, checking that every passenger had their seatbelt securely fastened and reminding them to remain calm. Lila's mind raced as she tried to process what was happening. Mechanical issue. What did that mean? Could the engines fail? Could the plane lose altitude? The questions bounced around in her head, each one more alarming than the last. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself, repeating silently that panic would not help. She looked around, seeing similar expressions of worry etched across the faces of the passengers near her. Strangers were suddenly connected by a shared anxiety, all of them confronting the vulnerability of being suspended thousands of feet above the ground. The hum of the engines seemed louder now, almost menacing, as if the metal giant beneath them had grown unpredictable. Lila noticed the subtle tension in the plane's movement, the small jerks and vibrations that she had previously ignored. The sky outside the window, which had been so serene, now seemed to hold a threatening quiet, as if the clouds themselves were watching the unfolding drama. Every sound in the cabin, the rustle of a bag, the soft squeak of a seat, the murmurs of passengers felt magnified, sharp, and urgent. Nearby, a man muttered under his breath, trying to make sense of the situation. "How bad is it?" he asked, not really expecting an answer. Others whispered the same questions to those around them. Lila felt the pressure of fear pressing on her chest, a weight that made it difficult to think clearly. But amid the chaos, she realized she needed to focus. Panic was contagious, and she could see already how easily fear was spreading. If she wanted to stay calm, she had to take control of her thoughts. The captain's voice returned, steadier this time but still serious. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are following all emergency procedures. Please remain calm and seated. Flight attendants, ensure all passengers are prepared for possible emergency landing. We are in communication with ground control and will manage this situation." Hearing the words, Lila felt a small measure of reassurance. The captain's voice was firm, professional, and commanding. It reminded her that there were trained people on board, people who knew what to do even in terrifying circumstances. She glanced at the flight attendants again, noting how efficiently they moved, checking straps, instructing passengers, and keeping their composure. It was inspiring, in a way, to see such calm under pressure. Suddenly, the plane shuddered again, more forcefully this time. A low, metallic groan reverberated through the cabin, and Lila instinctively tightened her grip on her seat. Passengers gasped, some clutched each other, a small child cried softly, and a woman nearby tried to comfort him, her own voice quivering. Lila's mind raced with worst-case scenarios, but she forced herself to breathe steadily, remembering the advice she had once read about staying calm during turbulence or emergencies. Focus, assess, breathe. That was all she could do. She looked around and noticed the human stories unfolding in miniature around her. A young couple held hands tightly, whispering reassurance to each other. An elderly man muttered prayers under his breath, lips moving in small, hurried motions. Flight attendants moved tirelessly, offering quiet words, helping to secure bags and belts, and ensuring the safety of children and elderly passengers. Lila realized that fear, while powerful, could be met with courage, calmness, and cooperation. Then, as if to test the limits of their patience and composure, the plane dipped slightly, an unexpected movement that caused a ripple of panic to surge through the cabin. People gripped their armrests, knuckles white. The flight attendants shouted brief instructions, urging passengers to remain calm, fasten their belts, and brace themselves. Lila's heart pounded, but she remembered to breathe deeply, keeping her mind as steady as possible. She glanced at the other passengers, noticing how differently everyone reacted to the same situation. Some were frozen with fear, others whispered encouragement to those around them, and a few seemed almost detached, observing everything as though it were happening to someone else. Lila found herself drawn to the elderly man beside her, who seemed especially frightened. She placed a hand gently on his arm, offering a quiet, "It's going to be okay." Though even she wasn't entirely sure of it. He nodded faintly, drawing comfort from her presence. Time seemed to stretch as the plane continued its journey, each minute loaded with tension. The captain's voice came again, offering updates, calm but firm. Lila listened closely, trying to understand the situation. The mechanical issue, he explained, was being handled. And though the plane was safe for now, everyone needed to be prepared for potential emergency procedures. The words were both reassuring and frightening, a delicate balance between hope and reality. Lila felt a strange mixture of fear, curiosity, and focus. The fear was natural, the adrenaline sharp and alive in her body. But there was also a sense of fascination. She watched how people reacted, how fear could both paralyze and inspire courage. She observed small acts of kindness, the mother comforting her child, passengers sharing water, someone helping a nervous neighbor fasten a seatbelt. In the midst of danger, humanity revealed itself in subtle, profound ways. As the plane leveled off slightly, the turbulence easing a little, Lila allowed herself a moment to reflect. She had no control over the mechanical issue, no influence over the captain's decisions or the plane's path. What she could control was her own response. She decided to focus on helping where she could, offering calm words, assisting passengers in her immediate vicinity, and staying alert to any instructions from the crew. In this small way, she could assert a sense of purpose amidst chaos. The next few moments passed in a tense rhythm. Every sound, every movement felt amplified. The soft whine of the engines, the quiet rustle of blankets, the occasional cough, all were reminders that life continued, fragile and uncertain. Even at 30,000 feet, Lila's mind was a mix of fear and determination. She knew that whatever happened next, she wanted to face it with courage, clarity, and awareness. And then, the plane tilted slightly again, another reminder that they were not entirely in control. Lila gripped her seat tightly, her eyes scanning the cabin. People around her were bracing, some whispering prayers, some holding hands, some staring silently out the windows. Flight attendants moved swiftly, offering quiet reassurance while managing tasks with calm precision. The captain's voice returned, steady and commanding. "Remain calm. We are taking all necessary precautions. We will keep you informed. Please stay seated and secure." In that moment, Lila realized something profound. Fear was powerful, yes, but so was composure. Courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. She took a deep breath, feeling her heartbeat slow slightly, focusing on small, manageable actions. Fasten the belt. Keep calm. Help the neighbor. Listen to the crew. She felt a sense of purpose, a quiet strength growing in her chest. And so, high above the clouds, the passengers of the plane faced uncertainty together. Lila remained alert, aware, and surprisingly calm considering the situation. She knew that the hours ahead would be challenging, that fear and tension were only the beginning. But she also understood that this moment suspended between danger and survival would define not only the flight, but her own capacity to respond with courage, compassion, and calm. The hum of the engines had taken on a tense, almost anxious quality now, filling the cabin with a constant vibration that passengers could not ignore. Lila's heart was still racing, but she had begun to focus her attention on the people around her. She realized, with a sudden clarity, that fear was contagious. Those who panicked first often inspired panic in others. And she could see this happening in real time. People were gripping armrests, whispering anxiously, and in some cases, sobbing quietly. The tension was thick enough to feel in the air, pressing on everyone as the plane continued to slice through the clouds. A young child sitting a few rows ahead had begun to cry uncontrollably. The mother was trying to calm him, whispering words of reassurance while tears slipped down her cheeks. Lila felt a surge of empathy and instinctively moved closer. She whispered gently, offering the mother a calm smile. "He'll be okay," she said softly, though even she was unsure. "Just keep breathing slowly." The mother nodded, a flicker of relief crossing her face. and the child's cries softened slightly. In that small act, Leela felt a spark of purpose, a sense that even amid chaos, one person could make a difference. Flight attendants were moving swiftly down the aisles, checking seatbelts, adjusting harnesses, and ensuring that everyone had oxygen masks within reach. Their professionalism was remarkable, but Lila noticed the faint lines of fatigue and worry on their faces. They were working tirelessly, managing fear, performing tasks with precision, and yet carrying the invisible weight of responsibility for hundreds of lives. Lila could see that the emergency was real, but also that calm action was keeping it under control. The sight inspired her to focus, to not allow panic to cloud her judgment. Suddenly, the plane jolted violently, causing a ripple of gasps and cries to sweep through the cabin. Some passengers gripped the armrests so tightly that their knuckles turned white. Lila herself felt her stomach lurch as the aircraft tilted slightly, the metal beneath them vibrating with a strange groan. She instinctively reached out to steady the elderly man beside her, whose face had gone pale with fear. His hands shook as he gripped the armrests, and she placed hers gently over his, squeezing reassuringly. "You're going to be okay," she said again, her voice calm even as her own nerves threatened to fray. Around her, the human drama was unfolding in vivid, urgent detail. A man in a nearby aisle tried to assist his wife with her oxygen mask, but his own hands trembled. A teenage girl clutched her backpack, staring at the ceiling with wide, frightened eyes. Flight attendants shouted short, concise instructions, guiding passengers on how to brace, adjust belts, and secure loose items. Lila realized that the fear she felt could be transformed into action if she stayed focused. Each small act, helping a neighbor, calming a frightened child, following instructions carefully, was a way to regain control in a situation that felt completely out of control. The captain's voice came over the intercom again. Steady but firm. "We are preparing for an emergency landing. Please remain calm. Flight attendants, ensure that all passengers are following safety procedures. We will be on the ground shortly." The words brought a mixture of relief and renewed tension. Relief, because the plan was being followed and the crew was competent. Tension, because landing under these circumstances was never simple. Lila's heart pounded, but she felt a growing determination. She would not allow fear to paralyze her or those around her. As the plane continued its descent, the turbulence grew stronger. Lila's instincts guided her as she noticed passengers struggling to secure themselves. A young boy, perhaps 7 or 8, was having difficulty with his seatbelt, panic spreading across his face. Without thinking, Lila leaned over and helped him adjust the strap, guiding his small hands and encouraging him to breathe slowly. The boy nodded, reassured by her presence, and she felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. It was a small victory, but in that moment, small victories meant everything. Nearby, the elderly man she had been comforting now seemed slightly steadier. Lila encouraged him to focus on his breathing, counting quietly with him, in and out, slowly and deliberately. The flight attendants moved past again, checking passengers and giving instructions with calm authority. Lila followed along, mimicking their methods where she could. She realized that courage in this situation was not about grand gestures but about steady, small actions that helped others remain calm. The plane jolted again, this time with a loud, metallic groan that made the cabin vibrate. Passengers gasped, and some cried out. Lila tightened her own grip on the armrest but did not let herself succumb to panic. She noticed a young woman sitting nearby who seemed paralyzed with fear. Without thinking, she leaned toward her and whispered, "It's going to be okay. Focus on me. Breathe slowly." The woman's shaking lessened slightly, her eyes darting around nervously, but now, with a hint of hope, Lila realized that in moments like these, the presence of calm and confidence could ripple outward, affecting everyone in subtle but important ways. The turbulence continued, and the plane dipped and swayed unpredictably. Lila saw how different people reacted. Some stiffened, some prayed silently, and some whispered words of reassurance to those around them. She noticed a middle-aged man trying to help his elderly mother with her harness, and she offered a quick hand to adjust it, nodding to him as a silent gesture of support. In that small, enclosed space, every tiny act of kindness mattered. Every hand extended, every calm word spoken, made a difference. Then, as if the plane sensed the rising tension, the turbulence lessened slightly, and the aircraft steadied for a brief moment. The calm was deceptive, but it gave Lila a chance to catch her breath and assess the situation. She looked around, observing passengers, noting who might need help. She realized that in these moments, fear could be managed, and courage could be learned. Even the smallest actions, holding a hand, offering a reassuring word, mimicking the crew's calm, were ways to take control when everything else seemed uncertain. Lila noticed a flight attendant moving toward the front of the cabin, checking on passengers and giving precise instructions. She saw the same quiet professionalism she had noticed earlier, and it strengthened her resolve. She could follow their example in her small corner of the plane. She could be a steady presence, a quiet support, a small anchor in a turbulent storm. The plane dipped again, causing a wave of tension to ripple through the cabin. Lila gripped her seat tightly, but focused on helping those nearby. She reminded herself that courage was not the absence of fear, it was action in spite of it. Every action mattered. Helping the child, comforting the elderly man, guiding her neighbors, these small acts became her way of coping, her way of turning fear into purpose. Minutes passed, each one heavy with suspense. The hum of the engines, the faint groans of the plane, and the quiet murmurs of passengers created an almost surreal atmosphere. Leela stayed alert, her senses heightened. She observed everything, the subtle changes in the plane's movement, the expressions of the passengers, the precise movements of the crew. She realized that being aware, being present, and being calm were tools she could use in this moment. Then, a sudden jolt shook the plane more violently than before. A loud metallic sound reverberated through the cabin, and passengers screamed, clutching armrests and each other. Lila instinctively leaned toward the nearest passengers, guiding them to brace and stay calm. She focused on her breathing, counting silently, and encouraged others to do the same. In that moment, she felt a strange sense of clarity. Fear was present, yes, but courage was stronger. Small, deliberate actions could make a difference, and she was determined to act. The plane continued its descent, engines groaning, turbulence shaking the cabin, and passengers holding on to their seats and each other. Lila noticed the bond forming among strangers, the shared sense of vulnerability and determination. She realized that in times of crisis, humanity showed itself in its truest form: kindness, courage, empathy, and cooperation. She continued to help where she could, comforting those nearby, guiding hands, offering calm words, and following the crew's instructions closely. And so, in the midst of fear and uncertainty, Lila discovered a quiet strength within herself. She understood that heroism was not always about grand gestures. It was about presence, courage, and action in small but meaningful ways. As the plane continued its journey, high above the clouds, she prepared herself for whatever might come next, ready to face the challenge with clarity, calm, and compassion. The plane's descent had become more urgent now. Every passenger could feel the subtle but constant pull of gravity as the aircraft tilted and adjusted its path. The cabin, once filled with soft murmurs and quiet tension, had grown electric with anxiety. Lila's heart pounded in her chest, yet she focused fiercely on staying calm and helping those around her. She could feel the collective fear of hundreds of people pressing against her, and she understood that her small actions, words, gestures, presence could help soothe that tension. The captain's voice came over the intercom once more, steady and commanding, but with an unmistakable edge of urgency. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are preparing for an emergency landing. Please remain seated, fasten your seatbelts, and follow all instructions from the crew. We will be on the ground shortly. Flight attendants, ensure all passengers are secure." The words caused a ripple of murmurs and nervous gasps to sweep through the cabin. Every listener understood the gravity of the situation. This was no ordinary landing. Lila took a deep breath, letting her mind focus on the immediate tasks at hand. The elderly man she had been comforting looked pale and shaken, and she gently placed her hand on his arm. "We'll be fine," she whispered softly, though her words felt almost fragile in the tense air. He nodded faintly, drawing some comfort from her calm presence. She noticed others around her, children clutching parents, passengers staring tensely at the windows, and a few trying desperately to maintain composure despite their fear. The moment demanded courage, not just from the crew, but from every individual on the plane. The turbulence worsened as the aircraft approached lower altitudes. The plane swayed unpredictably, causing items to rattle in overhead bins despite being secured, and small bags to shift against seatbacks. Lila instinctively leaned forward, helping a young woman adjust her seatbelt and gently holding her hand to reassure her. The woman's trembling lessened slightly, and Lila realized how much a small gesture of kindness could stabilize fear. She focused on being aware, present, and proactive, taking charge of what she could control in this situation. Flight attendants moved rapidly, yet calmly, guiding passengers, securing seats, and preparing everyone for the landing. Lila watched them closely, absorbing every movement and instruction. She mimicked their calm efficiency, reminding herself to breathe slowly, speak softly, and keep her eyes open to those who needed help. She noticed a child struggling to put on an oxygen mask correctly. Without hesitation, she leaned over and gently adjusted it, guiding the child's small hands and offering encouraging words. The child's mother looked at her gratefully, and for a brief moment, Lila felt a glimmer of hope amidst the tension. Then, the plane shuddered again, harder than before. A loud metallic groan reverberated through the cabin, and passengers instinctively gripped armrests and each other. Lila tightened her own hold on the seat, bracing herself against the sudden jerk. She could feel the fear radiating from those around her, but she refused to let it dominate her thoughts. She spoke quietly to the elderly man again, guiding him to focus on his breathing, counting slowly. 1, 2, 3. In. 1, 2, 3. Out. His shaking subsided marginally, and Lila realized that in moments like these, calmness was contagious. The plane tilted again as it approached the runway. Rain streaked the windows, and lightning flashed faintly in the distance, illuminating the clouds in pale, flickering light. The engines groaned, and passengers felt every vibration and tilt. Lila's senses were heightened. Every movement of the plane, every sound, every change in pressure, demanded attention. She focused on her own breathing first, steadying herself so that she could continue to help others. Panic, she reminded herself, was a choice, and she was choosing courage. She looked around the cabin, noticing the subtle ways fear manifested in people. Hands gripping armrests too tightly, lips moving in whispered prayers, wide eyes staring at the ceiling. She spoke to those near her, offering calm reassurance, mimicking the crew's instructions, and helping those who struggled. A man a few rows ahead seemed frozen, unable to help his daughter secure her seatbelt. Lila moved swiftly, showing him how to adjust the harness while offering words of encouragement. The girl's frightened eyes softened as she felt the support from both Lila and her father. The plane continued its descent, and the tension grew palpable. The cabin lights flickered slightly, adding to the surreal intensity of the moment. Lila noticed a flight attendant checking a small group of passengers near the front. She observed how the attendant moved with precision, voice calm yet firm, guiding people step by step through the emergency procedures. Lila followed closely, ensuring that her immediate area was secure. Every strap adjusted, every hand held, every word of reassurance mattered. Suddenly, the aircraft dipped more sharply, and a wave of panic swept through the passengers. Children cried, mothers whispered frantic reassurances, and some adults murmured prayers under their breath. Lila's own heart jumped, but she focused on her immediate circle. She helped a young boy adjust his seatbelt, guided the elderly man to keep his arms steady, and encouraged others to take slow, deep breaths. In that moment, she understood that fear could be transformed into calm action, and calm action could ripple outward to help others. The plane's landing gear deployed with a loud mechanical clunk, followed by the soft vibrations of the wheels lowering. The captain's voice came again. Prepare for landing. Keep your seatbelt fastened, and brace for impact if necessary. "We are almost on the ground." The words caused a collective tightening of muscles in the cabin. Lila could feel the anticipation and anxiety pressing against every passenger. She focused on keeping her own body steady, a visible presence of calm for those around her. Rain lashed against the windows, and the plane descended steadily through low clouds. Lila watched the horizon, trying to gauge the distance and speed, though she knew little about aviation. What she did know was the power of presence. Her calmness, her words, her actions could help others endure this harrowing experience. She leaned over slightly to comfort the child near her, speaking softly and holding his hand. She encouraged him to focus on her voice, to follow her breathing, to stay present rather than letting fear overwhelm him. The plane struck the runway, wheels screeching slightly as friction slowed the descent. The cabin jolted violently, sending a wave of alarm through the passengers. Lila held on tightly, helping the elderly man and others near her maintain their positions. Flight attendants moved swiftly, giving instructions and ensuring everyone stayed secure. The plane began to slow gradually, but every vibration, every sound of the braking system, was amplified in the tense cabin. Lila's hands were steady, her voice calm, and her focus unwavering. Finally, the aircraft came to a stop. The engines still hummed, but the vibration subsided, and passengers slowly realized they were on solid ground. The relief was instantaneous and overwhelming. Tears, sighs, and soft laughter mingled with quiet sobs of gratitude. Lila allowed herself a brief moment to exhale, feeling the tension in her body begin to ease. Around her, passengers began to check on each other, sharing small smiles, handshakes, and words of thanks. Emergency crews approached the plane as doors opened, ready to assist. Lila helped guide the elderly man and others toward the exits, ensuring they could disembark safely. She saw the gratitude in the eyes of those she had assisted, and a quiet sense of accomplishment filled her chest. Though the flight had been terrifying, she realized that courage was not just about surviving, it was about helping others survive with dignity and calm. As she stepped onto the tarmac, Lila looked back at the plane that had carried them through the storm. The experience had been harrowing, but it had revealed something profound about human nature. Fear existed, yes, but so did courage, compassion, and resilience. She felt a sense of awe for the flight crew who had guided them through the crisis, for the passengers who had supported each other, and for herself, for discovering the strength to act when it mattered most. Even as the adrenaline faded, the memory of those tense moments remained vivid. Lila knew she would never forget the way fear had been transformed into calm action, how small gestures of kindness could stabilize entire groups of people, and how courage could emerge in ordinary individuals when the circumstances demanded it. It was a lesson that would stay with her forever, that even in the face of danger, humanity could rise, quietly and powerfully, to meet the challenge. And so, amid the rain and flashing lights of emergency crews, Lila took a final deep breath. She had faced fear, uncertainty, and chaos, and she had found courage, presence, and compassion within herself. The flight, once ordinary, had become unforgettable. She realized that true heroism often came in small acts, in calm words, and in steady hands. She had witnessed it in others, and now she had lived it herself. The journey was over, but the lessons of courage and human connection would remain, soaring alongside her as surely as the plane had carried them safely to the ground. The moment the plane's wheels finally touched the tarmac, a wave of relief swept through the cabin. Passengers exhaled as if they had been holding their breath for hours, some crying quietly, others hugging family members or strangers alike. Lila remained seated for a few moments, allowing herself to absorb the sense of safety that had finally returned. The engines still hummed, but the vibrations had eased, and the once menacing hum now felt like a gentle reminder that they had made it. The fear that had gripped everyone so tightly just moments ago was slowly giving way to gratitude and awe. Lila looked around the cabin and noticed the expressions on the faces of her fellow passengers. Some were pale, their faces etched with the memory of terror. Yet there were also smiles, small, trembling, but unmistakably present. People whispered to each other, sharing their relief, recounting the small moments of bravery or calm that had helped them endure the ordeal. Lila felt a swell of pride, not for herself alone, but for the collective courage of everyone on the plane. Each small act of kindness, each word of reassurance, each steady hand had contributed to their survival. The flight attendants moved swiftly, guiding passengers through the emergency procedures for disembarking safely. Lila helped the elderly man she had been supporting, ensuring he could step off the plane without difficulty. She noticed a few other passengers struggling to gather their belongings, some still trembling from the adrenaline and fear that had coursed through their bodies. Without hesitation, she offered assistance where she could, lifting a bag here, steadying a hand there. Each small action reminded her that courage was not only about surviving personally but also about helping others survive with dignity and calm. As she stepped onto the tarmac, the cold, wet air hit her face. Rain was falling steadily, and the bright flashing lights of the emergency crews illuminated the scene. Lila took a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything they had just endured. She looked at the aircraft, which had carried hundreds of lives through fear and uncertainty, and felt a deep sense of respect for the professionals who had guided them. The pilots, the crew, and even the passengers themselves had all played a part in ensuring a safe landing. It was a moment of collective heroism, born from necessity and shared humanity. Emergency personnel moved quickly, guiding passengers to buses that would take them safely into the airport terminal. Lila walked steadily, helping the elderly man into the vehicle and ensuring that the child she had comforted earlier was safely with his mother. Around her, people were beginning to exchange stories of what they had felt, what they had done, and how they had managed their fear. Lila listened quietly, nodding occasionally. Recognizing familiar threads in the experiences, shared panic transformed into calm action, fear countered with courage, strangers connected by necessity and empathy. Sitting in the bus, Lila felt the adrenaline begin to fade, replaced by a quiet exhaustion. Her hands, once steady with purpose, now tingled with the fatigue of hours spent maintaining calm and assisting others. Yet even in this exhaustion, she felt a profound sense of accomplishment. She had faced a moment that many people never experienced, and she had found strength, clarity, and courage she did not know she possessed. The memory of the plane's turbulence, the anxious faces of passengers, and the commanding presence of the crew would remain with her, vivid and enduring. As the bus drove toward the terminal, passengers began to reflect aloud, sharing personal stories of how they had reacted during the crisis. A man nearby recounted how he had helped his daughter adjust her seatbelt and realized how courage could emerge in unexpected moments. A mother told of how her child had stayed calm because of the small reassurances of strangers around them. Lila listened, absorbing these stories, and she realized that heroism often appeared in quiet, unspoken ways. It was not always the grand gestures seen on news reports, it was the small acts of presence, kindness, and steady action that mattered most. Once inside the terminal, the passengers were guided toward waiting areas where they could collect themselves, contact loved ones, and begin to process what had happened. Lila found a quiet corner, taking a seat and closing her eyes for a brief moment. She felt the tremor of fear still lingering in her body, but it was now tempered by relief and gratitude. She thought about the captain's voice, calm and commanding, and the flight attendants, tirelessly moving through the cabin to ensure everyone's safety. She thought about the strangers who had become allies in survival, each person's courage contributing to the collective endurance. She noticed the elderly man from the flight sitting nearby, speaking softly with a relative who had come to meet him. He gave Lila a small, grateful smile, and she returned it, feeling a deep warmth inside. It was a simple gesture, but in that moment, it encapsulated the essence of the experience. The quiet power of connection, empathy, and courage in the face of fear. Lila reflected on her own journey during the flight, realizing that she had discovered a resilience within herself that she had never fully acknowledged before. Her thoughts wandered to the young child she had helped. She hoped that he and his mother would remember not the fear of the flight, but the calm, steady presence that had helped them through it. She understood that moments of crisis could leave lasting impressions, both of fear and of courage. The lessons learned during these intense experiences could shape a person's character, reminding them of what they were capable of when faced with challenges beyond their control. As she stood to stretch her legs, Lila noticed a group of passengers gathered near a wall, sharing stories and laughter as the tension of the flight began to dissipate. Some held hands, some hugged, and some simply smiled at one another in quiet relief. She realized that even in moments of terror, humanity had a way of connecting people, creating bonds that could endure long after the immediate danger had passed. She felt a profound sense of gratitude for this connection, for the chance to witness and participate in it firsthand. The airline staff were moving among the passengers, offering support, water, and blankets, ensuring that everyone felt safe and cared for. Lila thanked a flight attendant who had guided her during the landing, and the attendant smiled warmly, acknowledging her gratitude. It was a small, human moment amidst the larger story of survival and courage, a reminder that even in professional roles, kindness and empathy were just as important as skill and training. Sitting again, Lila reflected on how fear had shaped the flight experience. The initial panic had been intense, almost overwhelming, yet it had been transformed by calm action, courage, and the steady presence of those who took responsibility. She realized that fear was a natural response, but it did not have to dominate. Courage could emerge in ordinary people when circumstances demanded it, and small acts could ripple outward to create a safer, more controlled environment. The airport slowly began to return to its normal rhythm. Passengers moving through security, reclaiming luggage, and reconnecting with loved ones. Lila felt the residual adrenaline ebbing, replaced by a sense of reflection. She understood that she would carry this experience with her forever, not as a source of fear, but as a reminder of human resilience, connection, and the extraordinary capacity for courage in ordinary people. She thought back to the start of the flight, when she had been drifting in seat 8A, unaware of the events that were about to unfold. How different it had been. The calm anticipation of travel transformed into moments of terror and then, ultimately, triumph. Lila realized that life was fragile and unpredictable, but it was also full of opportunity to rise to challenges, help others, and discover strengths within herself that she had never known. Finally, as she prepared to leave the terminal, Lila felt a profound sense of closure. The experience had been harrowing, but it had revealed the best in people. The courage to act, the empathy to comfort, and the determination to endure. She walked slowly, noticing the smiles, the quiet conversations, and the lingering sense of relief around her. The memory of the flight, the turbulence, and the landing would remain. But so would the memory of courage, connection, and human resilience. Lila knew that she had grown through this experience. She had faced fear head-on, and had found calm and courage in the process. She had helped others, learned from strangers, and witnessed the extraordinary capacity for heroism in ordinary people. It was a lesson she would carry for the rest of her life. That even in the most frightening circumstances, human beings could rise, support one another, and survive together. As she stepped outside the terminal into the soft glow of the evening lights, Lila breathed deeply, feeling the cool air fill her lungs. The rain had stopped, and the sky was clearing, reflecting a sense of renewal after the storm. She smiled quietly to herself, feeling a sense of peace, gratitude, and awe. The journey was over, but the lessons, the courage, and the memory of shared humanity would stay with her forever. She had survived, yes, but she had also grown, discovering that even in fear, strength and compassion could guide her through anything life presented.